Hey, deserving listeners, the other way, 90-Day Fiancé. Let's see what happens.
Convince her that I'm trying to give effort, but I think this situation will never come. It's really hard to say, but I can't go against my family, and I'll choose my family.
Okay, so he knows that about himself, and we didn't know how he would react to this. So hopefully he can just tell her that, and maybe she'll adjust. It's within the realm of possibility that she could adjust and be like, okay, well, it's not ideal, but let's give this a shot. Let's live with your family. Now, his family has come out and said he can't even marry her. So yeah, maybe this is doomed. There is no way. So yeah, let's see how he communicates that to her.
But I'm also not ready to lose her. The thing is, I need time to talk to them also, na? Just to...
Time.
Yeah, and maybe that's true. Maybe there is a path to convince the family. But if I were Jen, I'd be like, there's no evidence that that's worth it. And the way that you kind of go about this and the way you talk about it, it doesn't seem like that's possible. It doesn't even seem like you're interested in actually really trying to make that happen. So yeah, it's probably for the best that they just move on, right? For the sake of themselves.
It's been 3 years, Rishi.
Yeah, that's another good point. 3 years. And we heard from other people in India on the show saying it is weird that Rishi hasn't brought it up with his family yet. So maybe his family is particular, right? And maybe his family is, we don't know. Like there might be something kind of particular about the family, not only in the viewpoints, but also the way they treat him.
We were like waiting for the good time to talk to them.
It's never going to be a good time. If your mom was upset about my age, she would find out about my age a couple months from now and still be upset. And she's not going to be like, oh, it's fine. Oh, who cares? She's a little bit older.
Yeah, good. I'm glad that Jed sees that, because that is certainly the way that it looks. He's saying, you jumped the gun. We just needed that date that the astrologist said. And yeah, does anyone think that waiting until that date would have magically changed the family culture and their viewpoint? No. So I'm glad she sees it that way. She's just like, no, there's no time. There's no good time that would have resulted in her it's not like if you're trying to ask your parents for money to go to the prom and it's a little expensive. And when you ask them when they're in a good mood, they're like, yes. And when they're in a bad mood, they say no. It's not one of those things, right? This is a fundamental belief that they have. It's seemingly, who knows, but given what we saw with Jenny and Summit, not everyone in India are like this, but it seems like some families in India are, and they had all the markers. But who knows? Maybe there is some. But he's not even indicating that. He isn't saying that there. If there was, I'm guessing he would bring it up. He's like, no, one time I did convince them of this one thing, and they did adjust. Or I have a brother that da-da-da-da. He's not saying anything like that. So it's probable that the parents are like Summit's parents, maybe even worse. Who knows?
Cool, though. Come on over. I don't even want to talk about this anymore because I'm insulted now.
Yeah, I think Jenny's approach is that Rishi's a jerk face, but I think that they're a victim of circumstance. And I hope that if they do break up, that they can both just take care of each other, because Rishi is in a bind. He should have been more upfront, and both of them should have done their homework around the cultural differences. They should have, it's been 3 years. They should have had a lot of self-reflection on what this actually means, especially him, because he would know more than she would about his circumstance, right? It's not one of those situations where someone cheated or someone was conning someone. I think their intentions were good, and he fell in love and was hoping that maybe there was a way forward and didn't want to think about reality, which a lot of people will do. But I don't know. I guess if you are Jen, you could legitimately have a gripe of like, you wasted 3 years. this could have been resolved so long ago. You could have told me 2.5 years ago, and then we could have gone through this vetting process then. You could have gone to your parents and said, what if, and got the answer and then told me. So yeah. But I don't think it's because Rishi is a jerkface. I think he was afraid.
Leave. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry too. The fact is that I am so hurt that honestly, I'm just so numb.
Okay, good. So they can hug. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if they get back together and go into denial again. Because, love is strong and there's not any direct reason in their relationship why they would break up. So it'd be hard to break up under these circumstances,
But I don't think he ever set out to hurt me.
We've seen this before where the lapel mics are smashed between the two people as they hug, and we hear one heartbeat and then we hear two. Maybe they edited it that way, but it's possible because, given the fact that the mics are both on both their hearts, we hear both their heartbeats. It's an interesting poetry there.
I don't want to lose you.
Yeah, and it's just heartbreaking. I'm from Seattle. I have a mainstream American culture. I don't understand why his family would be against this. I didn't understand Summit's parents, but far be it from me to criticize another culture. How am I supposed to know? There's pros and cons to that culture. I'm sure of it. And there are pros and cons to mainstream American points of view regarding these kinds of things. So I don't know what to think, but it's just heartbreaking that because to me, it always comes back to harm. If someone is, if a cultural practice or a cultural belief is in place to prevent harm, then I understand it. But if it's just a random cultural practice that maybe prevented harm in the past, but is no longer relevant in the present, then I think it needs to be shed. It needs to be discarded. It was important in the past, but no longer important today. Maybe there's a world in the past in this community where if the parents weren't very rigid about how their kids married, really horrible things would happen, But this is not a horrible thing. The two of them together is not a horrible thing. There's no harm. In any cultural practice that causes harm and doesn't prevent harm, I think is an injustice. It's not okay. I can apply it to my own culture. There are certain ideas that I was indoctrinated into that I would evaluate similarly. I'd be like, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So along those lines, in my culture, mainstream American culture, when you have an age gap of 10 plus years in a relationship, regardless of how old the individuals are, then it is considered to be a problem. It is inappropriate. It is creepy. It is wrong. It is doomed to fail. And I was indoctrinated into that for sure. But when I started to treat actual people and started to read research and understand how to read research and understand how to question my own beliefs without sufficient data, I learned to question that. And I looked into the research. There's nothing inherently harmful about an age gap in a relationship. Listen to my whole deep dive on that. And I suspect, as I always say, that at some point in our history, we developed this heuristic, this shortcut that if there's an age gap, because if you have a 12-year-old and a 20-year-old, and you don't know anything more than that, in all likelihood, there's exploitation and harm happening, right? But if we just heard a 20-year-old with a 12-year-old, how are you supposed to know? Well, we've decided that that's a problem, right? And so that just got applied across the board to any age of anyone, right? So if you have a 30-year-old and a 60-year-old, that's inherently a problem. And you'll hear people make up these very dubious claims as to why it's a problem. Well, there are different stages of life, and they don't understand each other, and it's weird. Real just hand wavy kinds of explanations that, what's wrong with being at different stages of life? Like, is that inherently a problem? People come from different cultures, so there's differences in individuals that don't inherently mean. And let's say that they were at different stages of life, and that was a problem in their relationship. Does that mean that relationship is off the table as an option? There are plenty of indications in the beginning of a relationship that would say, well, that's going to be a problem moving into the future. That doesn't mean that as a society we condemn those relationships. We might say, like, well, maybe that's not a good idea, but we don't say, no, that's inherently wrong, and I will oppose any manifestation of that. So I had to shed that. I had to look at that and say, I believe that 10 plus, maybe even just a few years. I mean, when I was younger, I thought of even just 3 years age difference was a problem. But I had to look at it and look at the data and figure it out. And I changed and I adjusted and I feel like I'm all on my own in this. There's not a Me Too movement around this, right? There's not some sort of movement online to stop stigmatizing age gaps in relationships. It's quite the opposite, really, because I think people think that they're advocating for anti-abuse of younger people and sexual abuse of people when, I'm all for that, obviously, but just this blanket application of those ideas is just unwarranted and stigmatizing and oppressive to relationships that there's nothing harmful about it, and there's an age gap. Anyway, so I've had to do that, and I would just wish that everyone would do that. And I wonder if the family of Rishi were to really look at it. Now, what some people will tell me is that the whole societal structure and economic structure of this family and of the community might be that the family, the older members of the family, literally have no way of taking care of themselves unless there is one of the children that stays behind and takes care of them, not only monetarily, but also physically, right? To get them things when they become immobile or whatever. And okay, then let's address other options. Let's address the system of the society so that it doesn't imprison one of the children. Now, some children want to live at home. Many children do. And many in-laws want to live with their in-law parents. So it's not like all the situations, if you did have flexibility, would be different. But there should be flexibility. There should be options. Rishi should be able to say, I want to marry Jen and I want to live in another place. I will come visit often, but I want that. I want both my family and I want to be with Jen. Let me know if there's something wrong with the way I'm thinking about this. Now, you could argue that in the present, the older people in the family won't have enough time or power to change the system. So Rishi's kind of stuck. But at least for the next generation of people, and I'm sure those movements are happening, right? But I don't know. It just breaks my heart that these two people seemingly have tremendous love. And, the only problems that we've seen were related to this issue, right, with the family. I mean, I guess he was flirting with other people online, but who knows what that means. I think I concluded in the end, and I think Jen did too, that he has a flirtatious nature, but it's harmless. He doesn't go beyond that. He was just being inappropriately flirty, and maybe he won't do that anymore. So it didn't seem like it was that, because he seems like the kind of person who wouldn't go further, wouldn't be some sort of Machiavellian jerk face that would be trying to pull one over on Jen. Who knows? But it just breaks my heart. It's, Jenny and Summit continue to break my heart because although they are married and living together, Summit is continually suffering from knowing that his parents, his community, his family are hating him, and that his mom and dad are incurring the judgment and the attacks of people in the community. That's what they talked about, right? So it wasn't just the parents' displeasure. It was, they know they're going to be essentially bullied by their society because they have a son that married a white woman from the United States who's older. Like, what? There's so many There's so much suffering in the world. Why do we create more of it as humans? We invent ways to make each other suffer. Okay, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.